Ju Gong runs through the busy city streets and passes by other pedestrians. His name literally translates to main character. As he enters a shop, the people inside call out to him and announce his arrival. While he has been teased for his name since he was young, he admits that he does not really care because he truly wants to be a main character. He tells the clerk to stop making fun of him and asks if the game is ready. The clerk chuckles and confirms that he has saved a copy for him. It is the remake of Night Saga. The game centers on a conflict between humans and demons, where a player typically chooses between the human hero, Locke, or the Demon King's eldest son, Zephyr Ragnaros. The gameplay involves adventuring across the world and completing various missions. Ju Gong has beaten the original game more than 10 times, so he knows everything there is to know about it. This version is the first release since the introduction of VR. Ju Gong enters his room and holds up the game cartridge. He makes sure everything is properly set up as he adjusts the VR helmet, slots the cartridge into the machine, and sits back. He tells himself he will take it easy and only play for 8 hours as he begins the game. Ju Gong wakes up and wonders what is happening. He looks around the room and questions if he is actually in the game, thinking that it is not a proper beginning if he does not wake up in a bed. He looks at his hands and wonders who this character is. A voice from behind a curtain asks if he is still sleeping. Karak pulls back the curtain and tells him to come out, reminding him that they are busy that day. Ju Gong reacts with surprise and remarks that the graphics are insane and feel like real life. This confuses Karak, who asks him what graphics are. Ju Gong wonders if he is actually able to talk with them, as he had not seen anything like this in the advertisements. He hesitantly asks for the other man's name. Karak asks if he has already forgotten and states that his name is Karak. He tells Ju Gong that everyone is waiting and urges him to hurry. Ju Gong remains silent while thinking about his character's name, Shutra Ignis, who is the Demon King's 9th son. He wonders why he did not even get to select his character. He moves his hand, and a status window appears. The display shows that Shutra Ignis is a 14-year-old Gandharv prince and a level 1 protagonist with only 5 points in every stat. Ju Gong wonders if he is forced to play as this character for his first run. He observes that even an ordinary NPC has at least 10 points in each stat, and questions why his own stats are so low when he is supposed to be a prince. Shutra checks his skills and views a system screen displaying conquest and protagonist setting adjustment. He questions what these mean as he tries to understand his new reality. Shutra questions the nature of his skills, specifically wondering if they really are conquest and protagonist setting adjustment. He tries to figure out what protagonist setting adjustment actually means for him. Shutra calls for someone to come out, and Karak answers from behind a curtain that he is on his way. When Karak steps into the room, Shutra is visibly confused. Shutra asks Karak about the protagonist setting adjustment, but Karak tells him to stop talking nonsense because they need to get moving. Shutra firmly declares that they need to eliminate the Scarlet Lightning bastards. This catches Karak by surprise, but he quickly yells to the group that this is their first battle and orders everyone to move out. Shutra panics internally, wondering what happened to his tutorial. The situation is dire because the Scarlet Lightning orcs have formed a military force for an uprising, creating a significant threat. Shutra wonders if he will have to resolve this matter alongside the 7th prince, Chris Moonlight, and the 8th princess, Caitlin Moonlight. Shutra asks Karak why they are only taking 10 people if this is a war, reminding him that he said they were only going to be patrolling. Karak asks if Shutra ate something wrong because he is acting so strange. Shutra remains silent and activates a magical interface. He is relieved to find a mini-map and decides to keep it active at all times to make things more convenient. Suddenly, Shutra notices a hidden path and wonders if it is a special event. While Karak looks at his map and claims the way is up ahead, Shutra knows that route will take forever. Shutra tells Karak to follow him instead because he knows a much faster way. The group of orcs travels through the forest and climbs up a rocky cliffside. Eventually, Shutra and Karak stand before a massive stone gate. Karak is out of breath and asks Shutra how he found this place, or if he is secretly a mage. Shutra is panting heavily and dismisses the idea, though he realizes that a level 1 body is incredibly unfit. Before Shutra can respond, a light suddenly appears on the ground, and an overwhelming power surges through his body. Shutra is shocked to see his system notification confirming that he leveled up just by walking. He quickly checks his stats and sees that everything increased by 2 points. He is amazed by the extra points, but a loud noise suddenly catches his attention. Karak tells him to stop what he is doing because they need to hurry. Shutra quickly agrees to the proposal. He feels a surge of confidence because he knows he will not have to face whatever lies ahead on his own. Most importantly, Shutra believes that his status as the protagonist gives him all the protection he needs to survive. Inside the cave, Karak wonders if the dwarves were the ones who dug the tunnels. Shutra is surprised because they don't have any dwarves, but Karak explains that while they are gone now, they used to exist. Shutra asks if they all moved out of the demonic realm, but Karak admits he isn't sure and has only heard stories. The group soon discovers a massive pile of weapons and treasure. The orcs celebrate the find, shouting that they have struck gold and mocking the dwarves for leaving such valuable gear behind. Shutra stands before the equipment, but his system notifies him that his level, strength, and magic are all too low to use any of it. Despite his annoyance, Shutra decides to take the items anyway. He touches a spear and commands the system to store it, realizing he only needs to touch an object and think about it to put it into his inventory. But the moment of peace doesn't last. Shutra looks at a holographic map and realizes something is wrong. He yells for everyone to back off just as a rift forms and a violent explosion of energy throws the orcs backward. Through the dust, Kaichan steps onto the cracked earth. As the general of the Scarlet Lightning tribe, Kaichan asks if they really thought their path would remain a secret. He gives the order for his forces to kill everyone, and the Scarlet Lightning warriors charge. The two forces collide in a brutal struggle. Shutra watches the blood spill and wonders what his next move should be. He decides he should at least try to steal some kills to gain experience points. Shutra moves stealthily toward the fighting and leaps at an enemy, but he is met with a harsh reality. His sword shatters against the red orc's skin, leaving him in total shock. The red orc growls and chases Shutra as he screams and tries to flee. Shutra trips over a rock and falls hard, and a system notification reveals his health has dropped to a critical 1 point. And Red Orc lunges at him to deliver the final blow, but Karak suddenly intercepts the attack. Karak blocks the blade and yells for the prince to move. Shutra can only stammer Karak's name as he watches the fierce struggle, staring down at his trembling hands while the battle continues. Shutra notices that his hands are still shaking, reminding himself that this is all just a game. He decides he has had enough for the day and tries to pull up the menu, noting how terrifyingly real the entire experience feels. A system message asks if he wants to access the menu, and his status window appears, identifying him as a 14-year-old prince named Gandharv. Shutra remains silent as a notification informs him that he does not possess any skills yet. Confused, Shutra asks what is going on. As he scrolls through his status window, equipment, and inventory, he realizes there is no option to end the game. A terrifying possibility enters Shutra's mind. He might actually be trapped inside. Shutra sits on the ground, surrounded by the bodies of defeated orcs, while a massive battle rages at the back of the cave. Kaichan swings his mace, releasing a surge of pink energy. Shutra looks up in terror and yells that he cannot die in this place. The energy blast hits Shutra with full force, throwing him backward as it explodes against him. Shutra lies battered on the ground, panting heavily as he struggles to recover. As Shutra remains collapsed on the floor, Kaichan emerges from the shadows. Both of them are gasping for breath as Kaichan looms over him, preparing his next move. A high-pitched sound rings out as a system notification confirms that Shutra's health has reached 0. Suddenly, Shutra finds himself standing alone in a dark, misty void. He looks around and asks where he is, remembering how the orcs took him down. Shutra grits his teeth, wondering if he has truly died. A flash of light erupts behind Shutra, and he turns around in surprise. A woman's voice commands him to conquer, telling him that he must enslave and then rule. Shutra asks what is happening as the light intensifies, and just like that, a massive battle breaks out as two armies collide on the field. The Red Orcs press their advantage, striking down the Orcs with savage blows and forcing them back. Kaichan stands in the middle of the chaos, observing the violence as the fight moves deeper into the pass. Kaichan thinks to himself that it is hard to believe the orcs came with such a small number, wondering if they are simply ignorant or stupid. Suddenly, Kaichan is taken aback, wondering if he is witnessing an awakening. He asks how Shutra is still standing there, but Shutra remains silent, completely enveloped in mana. A system notification chimes, informing Shutra that he has acquired the skill Telekinesis Level 1. Shutra gasps, wondering what is happening and how he could have possibly learned such a skill. Shutra notices something strange on his system interface, but his subclass is a Level 1 Knight of Conquest. He repeats the name in confusion, unsure of what this means for his future. Kaichan yells at his group, demanding to know what they are doing and ordering them to kill Shutra immediately. Karak gasps in surprise and calls out to the prince with clear concern. The warriors charge forward in a frenzy, shouting that they must protect Shutra and insisting that he must not be harmed. Shutra stands amidst the chaos as the battle rages around him. He grips his broken sword while a complex magic circle manifests before him. Shutra observes the system window, displaying his subclass again. He knows that Knight of Conquest is not a class typically available to knights, and he wonders why this is occurring now. Shutra unleashes his power, and a brilliant pillar of light surges upward from his position. He feels as if he has known these spells all along as they continue to echo in his head. Shutra realizes that the power of conquest is truly the power of a king. He leaps forward and activates his skill, commanding everyone to be under the king's banner. The orcs are shocked as the light from the skill washes over them. Shutra has activated his conquest skill, which provides massive buffs to all allies within the area. The orcs let out a roar, and one of them shouts that his strength is overflowing. They yell for the group to sweep the enemies away as they charge into the enemy ranks. An orc delivers a powerful punch. The orcs continue their aggressive assault, clashing violently with the red orcs across the battlefield. Kaichan, holding his staff, yells in shock as he realizes the enemies have suddenly become much stronger. As Kaichan stares ahead and mutters that the situation is absurd, he looks toward the source of the light and wonders what is happening. Shutra stands surrounded by jagged pink crystals as Kaichan leaps toward him, but he remains silent and completely focused. Karak smashes the ground with immense force, sending rocks flying. Shutra activates his skill as Karak lunges forward with a massive strike, his hand reaching for his target. Kaichan stands amidst the smoke, clutching his staff. Kaichan yells in panic, begging for a moment to wait. Karak managed to slash Kaiken's head. The red orcs notice, leaving them in shock. The orcs cheer, shouting that their enemies are fleeing, and command everyone to ensure no one escapes. Shutra stands as 3 system notifications appear to inform him that he is leveled up. He reacts with total shock. Shutra smiles and wonders aloud why his level is rising so fast. Karak stands behind him, his hand glowing with a golden light as he asks what kind of strength Shutra possesses while he was just minding his own business. Karak wonders if the situation is the result of the prince's influence. The camp remains quiet under the night sky as the orcs gather around their fires. Shutra sits in his room and yells that it is gone, unable to find the log out button no matter how hard he searches. He realizes with dread that the option is completely absent from his menu. He considers 2 possibilities. First, he thinks he might be trapped inside a virtual reality simulation and wonders if a critical bug has occurred in the real world. He reasons that if that is the case, it will be fixed once an update is released. He considers a second possibility, though he admits it sounds insane. Shutra realizes that this might be reality, not a game at all. He thinks that, just like in the novels and comics he knows, he has entered the world of the game, or at least a world that perfectly resembles it. He notes that the background feels entirely real, the NPCs can hold complex conversations, and most importantly, there is no mosaic censorship. He pulls at his waistband to check for himself, and confirms the lack of censorship. He wonders what would happen if this is truly another world and he would die here. He tells himself that he cannot afford to take that kind of risk. He feels a wave of relief that he is not an orc or an ogre, reminding himself that for now, he is a prince born with a golden spoon in his mouth. Karak pulls back the curtain and asks if Shutra has a moment to spare. Shutra looks back, startled. Outside, Shutra asks why Karak is suddenly demanding a sparring match. Karak explains that because Shutra is going to be his leader, knowing his swordsmanship level will help them prepare for the future. Shutra questions if that is really necessary, but Karak simply hands him a wooden sword. Karak tells him not to worry and promises to hold back as much as he can. Shutra laughs and asks if that is really the kind of thing one should say to a prince. Shutra lunges forward and warns Karak that if they're going to fight, he expects him to take it seriously. Karak swings his sword downward, but Shutra narrowly avoids the strike. Shutra darts forward and lands a blow on Karak's leg, forcing the orc to grunt in surprise. Shutra lets out a yell as he unleashes a series of rapid strikes against Karak's shield, leaving Karak to wonder exactly what his opponent is trying to achieve. As Shutra continues his relentless but ineffective assault, Karak stays silent and watches the display. Suddenly, Karak delivers a powerful swing that sends Shutra flying. Shutra hits the ground hard and groans from the impact. Karak asks if he is all right, prompting Shutra to complain that he should not have hit him with such force so suddenly. A system notification appears, informing Shutra that he has acquired basic swordsmanship level 1. Shutra stares at the floating message and questions what is happening. He wonders if he just gained swordsmanship and tries to recall when exactly it triggered. His eyes widen in realization. He reminds himself that this is just like what happened when he learned telekinesis. He concludes that he must acquire new skills whenever his body directly experiences an attack. Karak suggests that they end the sparring match there and go find something to eat. Shutra demands to know who decided the fight was over. Karak responds with visible confusion as Shutra plants his feet firmly on the ground. Shutra declares that he is only just getting started. He sprints forward with his sword drawn and strikes Karak's blade with a heavy blow. Karak reflects that Shutra's movements are significantly better than before. He wonders why Shutra had been so terrible at the start, as it seems impossible for his skill to have improved with such suddenness. Shutra and Karak clash their weapons together with immense force. Shutra lands on the ground and readies his sword for another exchange. He smiles and asks if that was not a good hit. He then asks Karak what level he is, and Karak replies that he believes he is level 21 based on the last time he checked. Shutra looks at the status display and notes the number 21. He tells himself that he should be able to catch up soon enough. His status window and level 7. In this world, everyone has a level, but they cannot check them instantly like Shutra can. They must use a level evaluation spell instead. Being able to see his own stats and reinforce them with extra points is a massive advantage. Shutra leaps through the air and strikes Karak with a swift slash. He realizes that if he can become stronger this quickly, he can seize his own destiny. He concludes that he can grow in power much faster than anyone else as they continue their combat on the snowy mountainside. This is the Demon Arc of Night Saga. The story centers on the rise of Zephyr, who eventually eliminates all of his siblings in the year 517 to ascend as the Demon King. Because this prophecy implies that Zephyr also faces destruction, Shutra realizes that he must become stronger than his brother to prevent this inevitable fate. Since it is currently the year 512, Shutra knows he must act quickly to change the future. Karak suddenly appears and asks Shutra why he is lingering, explaining that he has been searching everywhere for him. Shutra asks why Karak is looking for him, and if something has happened. Karak asks if Shutra has forgotten about the meeting scheduled for today. When Shutra expresses confusion, Karak urges him to hurry, because everyone is already waiting. They arrive at a massive military camp, filled with rows of tents and flying banners. Shutra sits at a table and lets out a nervous laugh. Chris sits across from him with Caitlin and stammers that Shutra has arrived early. Chris asks why Shutra is suddenly acting so polite, urging him to get comfortable and reminding him that they are siblings. This is the 7th prince, Chris Moonlight. Caitlin adds that this is actually the first time they have ever met, identifying herself as the 8th prince, Caitlin Moonlight. Chris tells Shutra that it is fine to use their names, and Shutra quietly agrees. These two are the children of Elaine Moonlight, the 4th queen and ruler of the lycanthropes. In another life, they were terrifying figures who commanded immense respect and fear, proving to be a massive headache in the game as well. While they stand together as a powerful duo, everything changes 1 year before the planned massacre. Both Chris and Caitlin are destined to die at the hands of Zephyr and the other children of the Demon King. Their eventual downfall is tied to a dark, hidden secret surrounding the birth of Caitlin Moonlight. Caitlin, the bastard daughter of the family, confronts Shutra about why he ignored the plan and engaged the enemies instead of sticking to his patrol. Shutra stammers that he had no idea they would attack from that direction. Caitlin steps closer to Shutra and insists on inspecting him for injuries, leaving him completely confused. She reminds Shutra that he is the weakest member of their group and demands he act with more caution. Shutra manages a stammered apology while wondering to himself why she is showing such concern for him, especially since the children of the Demon King were never this close before. Chris sighs from the background, muttering to himself, before shouting at Shutra that he will face a serious scolding if he ever does something that reckless again. Shutra agrees, questioning internally if the people he is surrounded by might actually be kind. As he hums thoughtfully, he recalls that lycanthropes often possess aura due to their immense life force. Shutra wonders if he can apply his own unique method for acquiring skills to learn how to use aura himself. Shutra turns to Chris and asks for a favor, which immediately confuses him. When Shutra asks if Chris could hit him using his aura, both Caitlin and Chris stare at him in total disbelief, demanding to know what he is talking about. A voice echoes through the mountains, and the sky turns black. The warriors of the Scarlet Lightning tribe let out a roar and charge into the fray. Bandal slams his fist into an opponent, sending the Red Orc tumbling backward with a pained shriek. During the chaos, a sharp blade pierces the armor Bandal. The Red Orc screams in terror as he watches his comrades being destroyed. Bandal commands his forces to kill everyone, promising a reward to the soldier who racks up the most kills. The orcs roar in unison and join the charge as flames and smoke engulf the entire battlefield. Shutra finds himself standing alone in a dark, empty void, wondering what is happening. Felicia Doomblade appears before him in a brilliant light, and Shutra begins to ask her where she comes from. He steps through a mysterious doorway and demands to know who the figures standing before him are. Shutra thinks to himself that he does not recognize these characters from the Night Saga game. A woman suddenly appears behind Shutra, causing him to react with total shock. A blinding flash of light consumes everything as a voice trails off into the distance. Shutra wakes up in his bed with a gasp of surprise. He sits up and touches his head, questioning if the entire ordeal was just a dream. Karak asks if Shutra is finally awake, making Shutra shout in shock. Shutra tells Karak that he scared him, and Karak notes that Shutra seems to be doing fine. Karak then asks why Shutra had requested the princess to hit him. Karak remarks that Shutra has spent enough time whining and starts to explain where those complaints have led him, but a sudden impact cuts the conversation short. Shutra is sent flying and wonders what exactly just happened to him. Shutra suddenly realizes he has successfully obtained Aura Level 1, and he excitedly announces to Karak that he can finally feel the energy within him. Karak asks if it is possible to awaken one's aura simply by taking a direct hit, and Shutra confirms that the process is indeed somewhat like that. Karak then asks if this is the reason Shutra was suddenly brimming with energy during his fight against the Lightning Tribe. Shutra confirms that his aura was the source of that power, and Karak expresses that he finally understands the situation. Shutra asks if anything noteworthy happened while he was asleep, and Karak confirms that events have unfolded. Karak announces that their main force has secured a victory against the Lightning Tribe, which leaves Shutra genuinely surprised. Shutra explains that Chris, Caitlin, and he are the only ones present to take down the tribe, but Karak expresses disbelief and asks if Shutra understands how massive the Lightning Tribe actually is. Shutra asks who is in charge of the enemy forces, and Karak identifies General Bandal as the leader. Shutra is shocked to hear that name, as General Bandal is one of the strongest warriors in the land. Shutra recalls that when he played as Zephyr, he deeply valued having General Bandal as a subordinate. Shutra realizes that since General Bandal only becomes Zephyr's subordinate in the year 515, the general is not yet under his command. Shutra knows he can recruit Bandal for himself because he already possesses full knowledge of the man. He understands exactly what rewards Bandal desires, what food he prefers, and what his unique talents are. Most importantly, Shutra knows that the key to winning Bandal's loyalty is to defeat him in a fair duel. Since he has plenty of time, Shutra decides it is worth the effort to secure Bandal as a subordinate before Zephyr can reach him. Chris shouts in pure shock upon realizing they have arrived at Caitlyn's camp. He cannot believe that Shutra managed to reach Aura Explosion in only a single day. Shutra simply smirks and tells him that such progress is expected since he invested all of his points into Aura. He explains that it was not a rash decision, noting that Aura improves physical capabilities across the board and is ultimately more useful than telekinesis. Chris gasps and declares that such a feat is impossible. He asks if this progress is only possible because Shutra is a Gandharv. Chris then questions why Shutra wants an underground map and asks if he is actually capable of creating one. Shutra thinks to himself that while he does not have a physical map, he still possesses his internal mini-map. He tells the others that the task is simple and asks them to lend him a pen and paper. Shutra gets to work and sketches a detailed map directly onto the table. Chris stares at the drawing in complete disbelief, exclaiming that it is far more detailed than any map he already possesses. Chris claps Shutra on the shoulder and calls him a genius, leaving Shutra to laugh awkwardly in response. Caitlyn points out that because all the members of the Scarlet Lightning tribe they encountered are dead, the enemy remains unaware that they know about the underground tunnels. Chris agrees and notes that they should be able to ambush the enemy by using the information Shutra provided. Chris then tells Shutra that there is something else he needs him to do. Shutra watches him in silence, wondering what the next request could be. As the mountain range stretches out across the horizon, Shutra asks if their mission is to patrol the area once more. He reminds himself that he has no choice in the matter, as he is currently the youngest of his siblings. Shutra remarks that it is a good thing they have reinforcements available. Karak replies that their current position is entirely thanks to their hard work, and another orc chuckles in agreement. Shutra suddenly stops in his tracks as he notices something ahead. He looks at two hooded figures and asks if one of them is his sister. Shutra questions why she is wearing a robe, but Caitlyn immediately hushes him. She explains that she is following him in secret just in case something goes wrong. She promises to step in only if things become truly dangerous, insisting that the mission must remain his own accomplishment. Shutra wonders if she is being foolish for trying to support him in that way, then asks her if the mission will really count as his own success if she is there. Syra then introduces herself as the adjutant and says it is nice to meet him. Shutra tells her he is glad to meet her as well, and Syra begins to explain the situation to him. Shutra tells his companions not to worry about the others, assuring them that the group will be able to keep up. Shutra acknowledges the plan, and the team approaches the mouth of a dark, imposing cave. As they venture deeper, Shutra asks why all the caverns they pass are completely empty. Karak points to the barren tables and abandoned chests, explaining that the inhabitants likely cleared out their valuables before moving, assuming the dwarves took whatever was left behind. Shutra questions what happened to the weapons they found during their last trip, and Kara guesses that those items were not considered valuable enough to take. The group pushes further into the depths until Karak stops, telling Shutra that he senses something approaching them. Shutra confirms that he hears the movement as well. Shutra pulls up a digital map and observes several red markers converging through the tunnel system, realizing that their pursuers have finally caught up. Shutra summons his inventory and reminds himself that he specifically brought the flash spell item for a situation exactly like this. Karak asks for clarification, clearly confused by the sudden preparation, but they are interrupted as a massive swarm of stone spiders lunges from the darkness. These monsters are known for traveling in swarms and carrying a lethal paralysis poison, making them a significant threat. Shutra screams for everyone to close their eyes immediately. He launches the bottle, which erupts into a blinding, intense light that floods the entire cavern. The stone spiders shriek in agony as the brilliance overwhelms their sensitive eyes. Shutra explains to his team that stone spiders are completely defenseless against light because they thrive in total darkness, and he commands everyone to attack while the monsters are vulnerable. The orcs let out a unified roar and charge into the fray, cutting down the disoriented spiders. As the battle intensifies, Shutra stands at the edge of the chaos and consults his system map. He notes that the spiders are moving in a tight formation and spots a single, large red dot centered among the cluster. Shutra realizes that a swarm of this size must have a leader, and he calls for Karak to follow him so they can take down the boss monster together. Karak shouts his agreement, and they rush headlong into the center of the fight. The group halts abruptly when they come face to face with the stone spider boss, which begins to scream at them. Karak launches an immediate assault, swinging his axe directly at the monster's back. While he connects with the creature, Karak is shocked to find that his attack causes absolutely no damage. He struggles to hold his ground, muttering that the monster is far too hard to handle. Shutra suddenly realizes he has made a critical mistake. He knows the axe will never penetrate that thick exoskeleton. He mentally scolds himself for forgetting that the creature's only true weakness is fire, especially since he lacks the ability to use fire magic himself. As the spider lets out a low, menacing growl and fixates on its prey, Karak senses the movement and reacts with pure shock as the monster lunges forward with a piercing screech. The beast looms over Karak, letting out a deafening roar. Shutra shouts at Karak to use fire, reminding him that the spider is vulnerable to it. Karak yells back in sheer frustration, asking where exactly he is supposed to find fire in such a desolate place. Caitlin quickly commands Shutra to raise his sword. Shutra does so, only to watch in total disbelief as his blade suddenly erupts into flames. Shutra shouts in surprise, asking Caitlin if this is the result of her magic. Caitlin stands in the distance, conjuring a massive orb of light, and asks if that power is enough to get the job done. Shutra looks back, calling out to his sister in awe. He steadies his resolve, holding his flaming blade as the massive shadow looms over him. With intense focus, Shutra dives downward, letting out a defiant shout as he plummets toward the spider. Shutra activates his burning blade skill and swings his sword in a powerful arc, causing a massive burst of energy to erupt. Shutra stands in the center of the impact zone, looking up as the light fades away. The system notifies Shutra that he has leveled up twice. Checking his status window, Shutra sees that he has reached level 9 and remarks on his new strength. Caitlin approaches to ask if he is alright, wondering exactly what that light was. Shutra tells her that it is a rare blessing that occurs occasionally, advising her not to worry about it. Caitlin asks if the blessing comes from Gandharv, and Shutra confirms that it does. Caitlin questions if Shutra has fought these creatures before, noting that his movements were quite skillful. Shutra claims he has only read about them in books, though he secretly knows he has fought them countless times in the game and understands exactly how they work. Karak points into the distance, telling Shutra to look ahead. Shutra acknowledges him with a hum as Karak observe a mysterious door blocking their path. The heavy stone doors creak loudly as they begin to swing open. Shutra, Karak, and Caitlin walk through the threshold into a massive chamber. Shutra looks around in surprise, finally realizing what he is seeing. He asks if it is a town portal and turns to ask Karak if he has any idea what that is. Karak admits that he has no knowledge of it. Shutra studies the patterns etched into the floor, sensing that they belong to a distinct dwarven style. He eyes a banner on the wall and recalls that during his time as Zephyr, he never once encountered such a relic. He walks closely and wonders if he inject mana to the crystal ball and if it will be activated. So, Shutra suggests to Caitlin that the structure might actually be a portal. Caitlin asks him if he is certain it is a portal. Syra examines the design and agrees that Shutra seems to be correct. Caitlin wonders if they can determine where the portal leads, and Syra notes that if they search the surrounding area, they should find some inscriptions. Karak calls out to Shutra, pointing toward letters carved directly into the wall. Shutra turns to look as Shutra and Caitlin move through the stone corridor. Shutra examines the inscription and realizes it is not written in Demon Common script. He concludes that the characters are indeed dwarven. Karak asks Shutra if he is able to read the text. Syra questions why anyone would expect her to know dwarven, and when Karak turns to her for her thoughts, Syra apologizes and admits she cannot read it either. Shutra reads the tablet aloud, identifying the location as Gishka Mountains, portal number 2. Caitlin and Syra stare at him in surprise. He continues reading, explaining that the path is connected to portal number 3. Karak and the others watch from behind as Shutra studies the wall. Suddenly, Shutra pauses, clearly confused by his own performance. He wonders to himself how he is suddenly able to read the Dwarven language. The system then notifies Shutra that he has acquired the Dwarven language skill at level 1. Shutra stares at the notification, stunned that he can acquire new languages in such a way. Karak asks Shutra if he can truly read the text, and Shutra confirms that he believes he can. Caitlin asks Shutra since when he has been able to read Dwarven. Both demand to know what the writing below says. Shutra explains that the instructions indicate the object will activate if mana is infused into it. Shutra asks Caitlin to inject a little mana into the spot, but Caitlin asks why she should be the one to do it instead of him. Shutra claims that he is still clumsy with his mana control, though he secretly admits to himself that he cannot use mana at all. Caitlin eventually agrees and places her hand on the orb. It begins to glow brightly as she pours her mana into it. The orb emits a powerful light and hums with intense energy. As the radiance fills the entire space, Shutra stammers and asks if they are in the Gishka Mountains. He points to their current location on the map, noting that portal number 3 should be exactly where they stand. Karak asks if that means they have found the Dwarven tunnels. Shutra confirms that the portals exist in that location as well. Karak remarks that this is fortunate because the main forces of the Scarlet Lightning tribe are stationed directly in front of those mountains. Shutra agrees, explaining that this positioning allows them to strike the enemy from behind. Shutra decides that they should stop for the day and return so he can discuss the situation with his brother. Karak agrees with the plan. Back at the camp, Chris shouts about how incredible it is that a portal is located in such a place. Chris grabs Shutra and yells that he is a blessing. Shutra stammers in response, caught off guard by the sudden outburst. Chris tells Shutra to name anything he wants, promising to grant the request as long as it falls within his power. Shutra stammers that he is fine as he is, but Chris insists that as his leader and elder, he wants to provide a reward, noting that his feelings would be hurt if Shutra refuses. After a moment of silence, Shutra asks if it would be okay, even if the request is somewhat unreasonable. Chris replies that hearing the request is unreasonable only makes him more curious to hear what it is. Shutra hesitates, struggling to find the right words, before finally asking if Chris can teach him the Beast God Fist art. Chris reacts with pure shock and asks Shutra to repeat himself. Shutra reminds himself that he cannot wield weapons properly, yet due to his low level. But martial techniques are a different matter. The Beast God Fist art is a powerful S-rank martial art passed down through the Lycanthrope royal family. Shutra thinks to himself that this is a ridiculous request and realizes he would understand if Chris refuses, assuming from the start that it might be impossible as Chris remains silent. But then, Chris tells Shutra that he will teach him, leaving Shutra completely surprised. Chris clarifies that he cannot teach the secret techniques, leading Shutra to ask if he is being serious. Chris asks if that is a good enough gift, and when Shutra stays silent, Chris asks if the silence means he does not like the offer. Shutra yells that this is not the case, and that the offer is absolutely perfect. As Shutra's name is called out, Chris smiles and asks Shutra if he can think of him as a brother from that point on. Shutra is taken aback by the idea of being called a brother. He reflects on the weight of the word, deciding that it is a meaningful term, and admits to himself that he does not dislike the idea, but actually quite likes it. Shutra agrees with a simple affirmation. Chris and Shutra shake hands firmly. Chris and Caitlin smile at Shutra, and Shutra smiles back, thinking to himself that they should work together from this moment forward. The system notifies Shutra that an alliance has been established with Chris Moonlight and Caitlin Moonlight, and notes that the alliance status is currently normal. The scene shifts to the encampment of the Scarlet Lightning tribe. 2 red orcs stand together within the camp, and one remarks that they would not have come targeting this place from the start. He mentions their princess and asks what brought her there as he looks down at Felicia Doomblade, who lies tied up on the ground. She is Felicia Doomblade, the 6th princess. Her status screen displays various attributes, with most stats at 21, while her charisma remains at 17. Shutra notes to himself that her charisma is an interesting point. Shutra sits on the floor and observes the screen, recalling that while his stats initially increased by 2 with every level, His charisma eventually only went up by 1. Shutra questions why his stats are behaving this way, noting that in the original Night Saga, appearance and charisma were always separate. He reasons that while appearance dictates beauty, charisma determines how likable he is to others, and he concludes that his growth pace is currently on the right track. Shutra reminds himself that reaching level 10 is his most important immediate goal. He thinks back to Night Saga, recalling how Zephyr and Locke reached level 10 while fully armored and prepared for battle. Shutra remembers that their unique skills, specifically Descendant of Darkness and the Chosen One, leveled up at that milestone. He figures that if he hits level 10, at least one of his own skills should improve. Karak peeks through the tent flaps and calls out to him. Shutra asks if everything is ready and if they should depart. Karak confirms that they are prepared and asks if something good happened, as Shutra seems uncharacteristically cheerful. Shutra replies that nothing special occurred. They walk through the camp together, marching past the assembled lines of orc warriors. Shutra announces that it is time to get going. The mountains loom under a clear sky as the orcs and wolves clash in a fierce battle inside the cavern. The skirmish continues as the forces push deeper toward a large stone door. Karak, Shutra, Chris, Caitlin, and Syra walk through the grand stone archway together. A hooded lycanthrope confirms that the portal is connected to the Eska River of the Gishka Mountains, just as Chris had predicted. Chris asks if the gate appears to be functioning properly. A hooded wolfman confirms there are no issues and remarks on its sturdiness, noting that the quality is exactly what one would expect from dwarven craftsmanship. Chris expresses his satisfaction and tells the group to move. 2 hooded wolfmen channel magic into a central orb, causing it to glow with a brilliant blue light. Chris, Caitlin, Bandal, and Shutra walk toward the portal. Shutra watches the gate, struggling to believe he is actually seeing a real portal in person. Caitlin looks back and asks Shutra what he is waiting for. Shutra replies that he is coming, and he quickly joins the group as they step through. They emerge on a cliff overlooking a massive army encampment spread across the valley below. Chris remarks that the encampment is exactly where he expected it to be, estimating there are roughly 5,000 troops based on the size of the camp. Chris states that supplies should be their priority if they intend to strike from the rear. He explains that if General Bandal launches an attack from the front to distract the enemy, their infiltrating units can burn down the food stores from behind, and Syra asks if they have noticed something. Shutra stares down at the camp, noting that there are clearly not enough troops present. Caitlin agrees with that assessment and asks where everyone could have possibly gone, and wonders if they have already launched an attack. Shutra gasps in surprise as a distant sound reaches his ears. Karak looks toward the horizon and asks what that noise is. Shutra tells him it sounds like a battle is taking place. Then, Chris ordered to Shutra that he must focus his aura on his eyes, causing Shutra to wonder about his aura. So, Shutra focuses his power. He gasps as he witnesses a battle in the distance, where red orcs are locked in intense combat. He tells the group that he can see the conflict clearly. Caitlin observes that one side appears to be the Lightning Tribe, but she asks who the other warriors could be. Chris clarifies that they are not General Bandal's men and points out that no battles were scheduled for today. Chris adds that the scale of the fight is far too small for a formal engagement. Shutra remains silent, carefully processing the scene. Below them, a chaotic skirmish breaks out as orcs clash with their weapons in the heat of battle. Watching from the cliffside, Shutra asks the group if those are dark elves. Caitlin turns to Shutra in surprise and asks if he just identified them as dark elves. Shutra confirms his observation, pointing out their smaller builds and noting that they are riding Dracos. Caitlin repeats the name of the creatures in confusion. Suddenly, Chris shouts that the combatants are retreating. Karak asks if the enemy commander has fallen, noting that they are pulling back at an incredible speed. Chris wonders what is going on and if the fight is already over. Shutra stays silent, and Shutra wonders to himself why Dark Elves would be present in this location. A holographic projection of General Bandal appears before Chris, Shutra, and Caitlin. Bandal states that he has heard they found the dwarves' portal. He remarks that it was expected of Chris's army, but asks how they knew there would be a portal in that specific location. Chris clarifies that he was not the one who found it, and credits the discovery to the ninth prince, Shutra. Shutra stammers that he had simply gotten lucky. Shutra remarks to General Bandal that seeing him again is strangely pleasant. Bandal responds that Shutra will be rewarded properly at the Demon King's castle for his work this time, and he asks if Shutra is aware of the situation at the Demon Tribe's camp. Chris interrupts to ask about a small skirmish that occurred in front of the Lightning Tribe's camp, questioning if Bandal knows anything about it. Bandal explains that it was likely the Dark Elves who joined the battle of their own accord. But this is only the beginning of the mystery. Chris questions why the Dark Elves would clash with the Lightning Tribe in the first place. He asks if they were not supposed to be reinforcements sent from the Demon King's castle. Bandal admits that he is unsure. Bandal reports that the scouting party's plans went sideways before they could regroup. Bandal warns that a much larger problem has emerged. Shutra asks what the issue is, sensing that the situation is about to deteriorate rapidly. Bandal reveals that the leader of the Dark Elves' independent unit has been captured by the Scarlet Lightning Tribe. Chris concludes that the reckless skirmish must have occurred because of that capture. Shutra asks who the commander of that independent unit is. Bandal notes that it is someone they know well. He reveals that the commander is their sister, the sixth princess, Felicia Doomblade. Chris and Caitlin react with shock to the news. Felicia Doomblade is the daughter of the third queen, Sylvia Doomblade, and the twin sister of the fifth prince, Sylvan Doomblade. Shutra recalls that in the game, Felicia and Sylvan both belong to the faction of the fourth princess, Anastasia Necrian. This is why Shutra has always viewed her as an enemy. Shutra wonders why Felicia has appeared in this territory and questions if she is interfering to claim merit for herself. Chris asks if the Scarlet Lightning Tribe even realizes that their captive is Felicia. Bandal appears on a holographic screen and explains that they have not yet confirmed if the enemy knows her identity. Chris asks what Bandal plans to do next. Bandal explains that they will save her if it is possible. Chris asks if there will be no negotiations. Bandal clarifies that they are willing to talk only if the other side makes the first move. Bandal adds that he has no intention of bowing down to them, and Chris acknowledges that stance. Bandal promises to gather more information and contact them if anything changes. The communication ends and the screen vanishes. Chris notes that their brilliant older sister has truly become a prisoner. Caitlin insists that they must save her if she is still alive. Chris admits that while that is the ideal outcome, it will not be an easy task. Chris warns that a rescue attempt could result in them suffering their own losses. Caitlin shouts that they must save her because she is their sister. Chris admits that he knows that, but he struggles to finish his thought. Shutra watches them from a distance, wondering what is happening between them. At their encampment, Chris gathers the group around a strategy map and states that their plan is simple. Chris explains that the real mission begins once he lures the main force of the Scarlet Lightning Tribe away. He reveals that they will strike the encampment from behind to finish the job. Chris details his plan to charge straight into the center of the enemy base to create maximum chaos. He instructs Caitlin and Shutra to lead their own squads to carry out the mission. Shutra asks if the mission is to rescue their sister, and Chris confirms that they must burn the enemy's food storage and armory before saving Felicia. Chris warns them sternly to retreat immediately if the situation becomes too dangerous, insisting that they cannot afford to lose more lives just for Felicia's sake. Caitlin Moonlight yells in protest at her brother. Chris commands her to be quiet and reminds her that he serves as the commander of the unit. Caitlin shouts that Felicia is family and demands to know how he can say such a thing. Chris Moonlight argues that they cannot allow Felicia's reckless actions to jeopardize the entire operation, while Shutra watches the conflict between them. Shutra wonders to himself what is going on. He contemplates that Chris does not seem intent on rescuing Felicia and questions if something happened between the two of them. A range of mountains sits beneath the sky. A boot steps onto the ground as a blade is raised, and a voice orders the warriors forward. The army of monsters lets out a collective roar and begins its charge. An orc yells for the annihilation of the Scarlet Lightning Tribe. Chris Moonlight stands on a cliff with his warriors and gazes down at the encampment spread across the valley, where fires burn and guards move between the tents. Suddenly, an explosion tears through the enemy camp, catching the Red Orcs off guard. Bandal and the orcs launch their forward assault, with Bandal yelling at his forces to kill them all. Meanwhile, Karak asks Shutra why they are not moving yet since the attack has begun. Shutra explains that they must wait for the signal. Blood splashes into the air as the orcs and the red orcs engage in an intense fight. Bandal watches the battle from the rear until he suddenly notices something wrong. Bandal yells for everyone to retreat immediately, declaring that the time has come. Chris watches from the ridge as the camp below is consumed by flames. He stands atop the rocks and orders his men to prepare to move. Shutra nods and tells his group to carry out the mission exactly as planned. Chris shouts for the army to charge as he leads the assault forward. The red orcs look up in surprise at the incoming roar, one of them reacting with visible shock. Wolves lunge at the orcs, and a chaotic battle breaks out. Caitlin yells for Shutra to be careful. Shutra tells her to be careful as well as he reaches out. Shutra touches a map displayed on the wall as Karak shouts for the group to move left and dash straight for the food storage. Another orc lets out a fierce battle cry, and Karak commands his allies to kill everyone in their path. Karak swings his weapon and strikes down an opponent with a powerful blow. Suddenly, the red demon lets out a thunderous roar as it lunges forward, and Karak watches in shock, unable to believe what is happening. Shutra intervenes, striking the red orc with a powerful blow that sends it reeling. Shutra successfully activates his dagger throwing skill, which allows him to strike targets from a distance with precision. Without wasting a moment, Shutra dashes across the battlefield. Karak catches up and asks Shutra when he learned to throw daggers with such skill. Shutra dismisses the ability as nothing special and urges them to move quickly, though he secretly wonders how he gained the skill just by tossing a dagger the night before. As they run, Shutra points toward a nearby structure and notes that it looks like the food storage, suggesting they simply set it on fire. Karak agrees and tells Shutra to continue with the plan. Shutra suddenly stops and asks what will happen to Felicia. He worries that if she is locked up inside, she could get caught in the flames and might even die. Shutra insists they have to find Felicia first. Karak asks how Shutra expects to find her, but Shutra tells him to hold on. And Shutra begins to run as he activates a holographic display. He reminds himself that Felicia should register as a neutral NPC to him, meaning she will be marked as either blue or purple on his map. He looks closely at the map, which displays several colored dots scattered across the area. Shutra's eyes widen as he notices something on the display. He shouts for Karak to follow him, and Karak acknowledges the order as he follows close behind. Shutra reaches out and pulls back the entrance to a tent. He steps inside and tells himself this has to be the place, though he wonders exactly where Felicia is. Suddenly, a voice calls out Shutra's name. Shutra notices Felicia and stops. Felicia asks Shutra what he is doing there. Felicia Doomblade stares at him in shock. Shutra explains that the place is dangerous, and they need to get her out as quickly as possible. Shutra thinks to himself that having Felicia indebted to him will be very useful in the future. Felicia remains silent, her gaze fixed on him as he works. They barely manage to escape the area with their lives. Shutra urges her to hurry so they can regroup with Chris and Caitlin. Felicia stops and asks if Chris and Caitlin really came all this way to rescue her. Shutra confirms it without hesitation and asks why she is even questioning it. Then he asks Felicia if they are not supposed to be there to rescue her. Felicia stammers that the situation is not what it seems. Felicia tells Shutra that because he has been far removed from the power struggle, he might not understand the gravity of their position, but she is cut off mid-sentence. Karak shouts that the enemies are swarming in, which catches Shutra completely off guard. Shutra calls for Felicia to get over to him immediately. Felicia agrees and follows his lead. She wonders to herself when Shutra started addressing her by her name. Suddenly, Shutra sprints away, leaving Felicia behind in confusion. Felicia shouts as Shutra turns back, clearly wondering what is happening. A sudden blast of light strikes Shutra, catching him completely by surprise. Shutra grunts in pain as the force hits him. The flames roar as the others watch the destruction unfold. Felicia stammers Shutra's name, her expression filled with shock and worry. Suddenly, an red orc lunges at Felicia with a roar, closing the distance in an instant. Felicia clicks her tongue in annoyance, refusing to back down. But then, her eyes widen as she notices something completely unexpected. Felicia gasps in surprise as an explosion erupts before her. She turns back toward the smoke and asks what it is. A foot steps firmly onto the ground. Shutra stands amidst the smoke, wielding a bow made of light. He acquires the skills Mana Control Level 1 and Fire Arrow Level 1. Shutra looks ahead with a confident smile. As he unleashes a powerful shot, striking the massive creature with a burst of flames, he grins while watching the impact. Shutra looses a flaming arrow from a bow of pure fire. The projectile strikes the red orc and explodes in a burst of heat. Shutra laughs and shouts that this is real magic, yelling that it is incredible even though it is only level 1. A jagged pillar of ice suddenly erupts from the ground, surprising Shutra. He looks at the frozen earth and questions if it is ice. And Red Orc Archer prepares to fire, but pauses in surprise as Shutra stands in the distance. Shutra turns his head sharply as he realizes the enemy is aiming directly at Felicia. Felicia calls out to him, desperately asking if he is all right. Without a moment's hesitation, Shutra shoves her away and yells for her not to come any closer. Felicia gasps in shock as she is pushed back, her voice trailing off as she calls out Shutra's name. Suddenly, a barrage of sharp ice shards materializes and flies toward Shutra, but he stands his ground firmly. Shutra begins to explain why he is taking such a risk. He looks ahead with a confident smile and declares that this particular enemy is his to handle. A violent explosion of ice and energy erupts. Thick white mist swirls and begins to settle. A system notification informs Shutra that he has acquired Ice Arrow Level 1, and he laughs as he realizes the potential of his new power. Shutra realizes that the reality of the situation is exactly as he had suspected. He suddenly looks up in surprise and questions what is unfolding around him. The force of an unseen impact sends Shutra skidding backward across the ground until he comes to an abrupt halt. A red system warning flashes as Shutra grips an ice shard and curses his critically low health. He grits his teeth and tells himself that he cannot afford to take another hit like that. But then, Felicia calls him an idiot. Shutra calls out Felicia's name, his voice thick with hesitation. Felicia turns to him with a sharp gaze and demands to know who gave him permission to save her. Shutra is left completely baffled by her aggressive reaction. She reminds him that he is the weakest of all their siblings and questions why he ever thought she was the one in need of rescue. Shutra realizes that Felicia is fundamentally misunderstanding the entire situation. He looks away in confusion, wondering what on earth is happening. Felicia asks him when he learned magic while he stares up at the watchtower, because Shutra recalls that she even managed to take down the mage just moments ago. Below the tower, the defeated Red Orc lies sprawled on the ground. Shutra finally understands the truth. Felicia has misinterpreted everything, believing that he stepped in to save her life. Suddenly, Shutra cries out in pain as Felicia pulled out the sharp object into his chest. Shutra gasps in shock and asks her what is happening. To his disbelief, the wound on Shutra's chest begins to close and then disappears entirely. The system notifies Shutra that he has acquired the skill Heal Level 1. Shutra thinks to himself that the wound has healed instantly. He reminds himself that this kind of power is expected of a genius mage like Felicia. Felicia asks Shutra if he is feeling better and if he is capable of standing up. Shutra replies that he is fine and thanks her, accidentally mentioning that his blood has been replenished. Felicia asks him what he means by blood, leaving Shutra to stammer as he tries to explain himself. A massive crash echoes from above, leaving Shutra wondering what is happening. A blood ogre lets out a deafening roar, and Shutra demands to know what kind of creature that is. Felicia explains that it is a blood ogre, a mutated species of ogre. Shutra asks if she is saying they have to get through that monster to escape, and Felicia confirms that they do. Shutra and Felicia stand together, preparing to face the threat. As the blood ogre roars again, Shutra lunges forward, questioning how they are supposed to fight such a beast. The blood ogre slams a fist into the ground, creating a massive shockwave. Shutra wonders why the creature is so fast despite its massive size. Felicia tells him to buy some time while she prepares to blow it away with magic. But Shutra asks how he is supposed to do something like that. Another impact shakes the ground, and Shutra tells Felicia he will aggro it somehow and instructs her to prepare her magic. Felicia asks what aggro is supposed to mean, and Shutra replies that it is just a thing. Shutra calls out for Karak and asks where he is. Karak shouts that he is right there. Shutra tells him they will do it just like last time and instructs him to get ready. Karak yells in response. Shutra opens his inventory, wondering if he will finally be able to use the dwarf's dagger. He grips the weapon firmly and drives the blade straight into the ground. A surge of energy radiates from the impact point as he holds his ground. Shutra yells that it is under the king's banner, and a massive pillar of light erupts toward Karak. As Karak, standing in the path of the energy, is unable to move. The power of the strike overwhelms him, tearing through his defenses as he lets out a deafening scream. Karak braces himself as the battle intensifies. He lunges forward, closing the gap with incredible speed. The two warriors clash in the center of the field, neither willing to back down. The blood ogre lets out a pained groan as he struggles to withstand the pressure. Without a moment's hesitation, Karak swings his weapon again, aiming to end the fight. The massive impact shakes the ground as Karak's strike connects with full force, and the blood ogre screams in agony as he is sent reeling back from the devastating blow. Felicia lunges at the red orc, descends while casting grease towards the blood orc that turns the ground slick and slippery to make the blood ogre lose his footing. The blood ogre slips on the wet surface and crashes backward onto the ground. Karak leaps over the fallen red orc while shouting that this is the end for their opponent. He launches himself into the air and drives his weight into the chest of the blood ogre, who lets out a pained scream as the impact tears through his body and crushes him into the cratered earth. Shutra stands nearby watching the scene, laughing breathlessly as he stammers that they have finally won. Although other enemies still remain, he realizes the most difficult threat has been dealt with. Shutra notices something strange happening and wonders what is unfolding. A sudden chime rings out, catching Shutra off guard as a system notification informs him that his level has increased to 10. Shutra shouts in excitement that he has finally reached level 10, and the level of his protagonist's setting adjustment skill increases along with it. He smiles to himself and remarks how awesome this feeling is. Thanks to the effect of his upgraded skill, a new passive ability is added to his arsenal. Shutra points forward and asks if it is time to open his gift box. Battlefield Protection Level 1 is activated, slightly decreasing the accuracy of any projectile weapons aimed at Shutra. He looks at the system screen and stammers that this is it. He realizes that this is the infamous Stormtrooper effect, something everyone has seen at least once where bullets rain down in volleys. Yet somehow every single one misses the main character. Shutra thinks to himself that with this skill, he can actually reproduce that classic protagonist plot armor. The red orcs let out a collective roar as they charge forward. Felicia runs towards Shutra, yelling to ask what he is doing, and Shutra stammers in acknowledgement. Felicia grits her teeth in concentration and shouts for the wind to whirl and rage. The red orcs scream as they are thrown back by the raw force of the wind. Shutra watches the scene unfold and realizes that while the power looks like standard magic, it is actually something else entirely. He realizes it is a spirit. The red orcs also realize they are facing a spirit summoner. Shutra knows that a dark elf is still an elf regardless of corruption, concluding that Felicia is not just a brilliant mage, but a natural-born spirit summoner. He pauses as a new thought occurs to him. Shutra stands with his back to the scene, watching a violent burst of magical energy that throws several men into the air. Shutra looks up with a blush and a wide smile, asking if he could be hit with something like that as well. But then, a bright light bursts from the sky, and the orcs quickly notice. Karak tells Shutra to take off his clothes. Shutra explains that the yellow flare is a retreat command, and asks Karak why they would need to retreat. As Shutra wonders what is happening out there, he worries about who might be in danger. Then, Karak asks what they should do, begging Shutra to give an order, but Shutra ordered him to take the troops and fall back, as he needed to see Caitlin. Upon hearing it, Karak was confused about what he meant about. Karak questions Shutra's plan and insists that he should be the one to accompany him. Shutra explains that there must be a specific reason for the retreat order and tells Karak to simply follow his instructions for now, though Karak remains hesitant. Suddenly, Felicia appears in the distance and announces that she will be the one going with Shutra. Karak is stunned and can barely stammer out a greeting to Felicia. Felicia makes it clear that she cannot stand the thought of owing anyone a favor. She looks away and mentions that she wants at least one chance to repay her debt, adding that she still has business to settle with those pigs. Karak stands in silence, unable to argue with her determination. He finally tells Shutra to be careful and promises that they will be waiting for them above. Shutra tells him that he will see him in a bit as he and Felicia prepare to move out. As they start walking, Felicia asks if he really feels the need to go find Caitlin. Shutra admits that the sudden retreat order feels incredibly suspicious. They walk past the Fallen as Felicia wonders if Caitlin could have possibly been caught by enemies like those. Shutra hopes that is not the case, so they can all return together. Felicia notes that he seems to be genuinely worried about Caitlin. Shutra tells Felicia that it is only natural since she is his sister, though he silently reminds himself that it is actually more because of their alliance. Felicia hums as she looks at him, repeating the phrase that it is only natural to herself. A group of red orcs charges forward. Caitlin leaps into the fray and focuses on the battle. Caitlin unleashes fire magic, blasting the monsters back. As the red orcs roar, Caitlin stands her ground in the middle of the battlefield. Caitlin moves quickly, striking down the monsters with her blade. She channels energy into her sword, preparing a powerful strike. Caitlin swings her blade, releasing a wave of energy that tears through the monsters while one red orc screams in pain. Shutra and Felicia arrive to see the field filled with fallen red orcs. Shutra stands with Felicia and thinks to himself that it is just as he expected, noting that there was nothing to worry about after all. Caitlin approaches and asks Shutra why he did not retreat and why he is there. Shutra stammers that he came to save her, or at least to help. Caitlin asks what he means by that. As Shutra and Felicia stand together, Caitlin rushes forward and throws her arms around Felicia while shouting her name. Caitlin pulls Felicia into a tight embrace and tells her how relieved that she is safe. Felicia blushes and insists that she was obviously safe all along, telling Caitlin that she worries far too much. Shutra watches the two of them with a smirk, thinking to himself that they seem incredibly close. A map suddenly lights up with red and blue markers as a series of urgent beeps fill the air. Shutra stares at the display, his eyes widening in complete surprise. So, Shutra warns that the enemy forces are circling back and urges the group to retreat immediately, and Felicia tells Shutra to lead the way while they cover the rear. Shutra agrees to the plan without hesitation. Shutra, Caitlin, and Felicia step through the portal together. Once through, Felicia asks Caitlin if it is true that Shutra was the one who found the exit. Caitlin confirms that Shutra played a massive role in the success of the operation. Felicia marvels at his competence, wondering to herself when exactly he had changed so much. Chris observes the group as they arrive and notes that everyone has returned safely. The moment Caitlin spots her brother, she calls out to him, excitedly reporting that she has successfully brought Felicia back. Felicia finally speaks up, remarking that it has been quite a long time since she and Chris last saw one another. Chris agrees that it has indeed been a very long time. Chris turns his attention directly to Felicia. As they move through the area, Chris shares the news that General Bandel's forces have also secured a victory. He explains that Yakuzan seemingly abandoned the fight the moment they realized their own camp was burning to the ground. Shutra asks if the name is Yakuzan. Caitlin confirms his identity, noting that Yakuzan is the chief of the Scarlet Lightning tribe, and wondering if Shutra has already forgotten. Felicia questions if Yakuzan has surrendered, but Chris clarifies that he has not surrendered at all. He has simply fled to another location. Chris warns that if Yakuzan manages to regroup with his scattered allies, he could still put up a significant fight. Because of that looming risk, Kaichin declares that they will strike the forces of his older brother, Kairam, the following day. He notes that it will become a massive problem if Yakuzan manages to join forces with Kairam. Deciding to move on, Kaichin turns to Felicia and asks what brought her so far out into these lands. After a moment of silence, Felicia explains that she had been researching nearby ruins and was captured while heading toward the battle to offer her assistance. Chris looks at her and asks if she is telling the truth. Felicia meets his gaze directly and asks why he suspects she is lying. Chris considers her words carefully before telling her that she has had a rough time and suggesting they leave the conversation there for the day. Chris calls out for everyone to get some rest. Felicia tells him that he has done good work, though she remains silent otherwise. The camp settles down as the orcs and lycanthropes eat and rest around the fire. A system window displays Shutra's own skills, including mana control, fire arrow, ice arrow, and heal. Shutra thinks to himself that simply looking at his list of abilities feels satisfying. Suddenly, Felicia calls out Shutra's name and asks if she can come in for a moment. Shutra turns in surprise and asks Felicia what brings her there at such a late hour. He notices that she has changed her clothes. Felicia remains silent as she reaches out and grips his clothing. Shutra gasps in surprise and asks her what is happening. Felicia leans in close and commands him to take off his clothes. That's all for today, folks. I know it's too short, but I might upload the next chapter tomorrow. I have an idea. If you like this episode, subscribe to my channel and let me know what manhwa do you want to featured next time.